In a moment, we'll be doing our morning chant. And for those of you in the room, you can use a chant book, page 30. And for those of you online, I've just posted in the chat a link to our Sunday documents resources, and you can open that up. And here it is again. And Jessica, maybe you can keep reposting that as more people join online. And also, while people are getting settled in, I've been posting on the calendar. You can get some of the resources that I'm covering in the Sunday morning talks. But I did print up one of the cheat sheets up here, so you could pick it up. And those of you online, you have it in the document that Jessica and I have been putting into the chat, so you can get it there. But you can always find the different articles I'm referring to. I don't put everything online, but a lot of the important documents I'll put up. And you can always go to the public calendar, look for the Sunday morning program, and there will be a link there for the Google Doc with all the other links, including the morning chat and other information related to the topics that we're covering. But in any case, let's settle in, find a posture that works for our body, remembering, of course, it won't be a perfect posture, just needs to be good enough to support some semblance of comfort. Again, not perfect comfort in the body, and some semblance of alertness, feeling as though we're willing to be right in the middle, upright, unafraid. And remember that non-fear manifests as a willingness to relax and to soften the body, to put down the load. And with all of that in mind, let's do our morning chant, Suffusion with the Divine Abidings, page 30 for those in the room. Open the document for those online, but it's a pretty easy chant to remember. These are how the Buddha instructed us to cultivate loving kindness. And it's really about keeping these four attitudes or four emotions in mind of loving kindness, compassion, gladness or appreciative joy, and equanimity. So let's do the chant together. Now let us make the four boundless qualities shine forth. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with compassion. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility, and without ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with gladness, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and ill will. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with equanimity, likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself, I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. And we'll settle in for a meditation time. Again, just finding or settling into that posture that supports both a relaxation in the body and alertness, wakefulness in the mind. That sense of sitting up in a relaxed way. Head is balanced over the shoulders, over the spine. Nose is in line with the navel. Arms and hands resting. Released, shoulders released. Muscles around the mouth and around the eyes can soften and relax. Allowing the belly to relax. And see if it's possible to feel at home in the present moment. Sensing, if you can, the naturalness of awareness, the present moment awareness being uncontrived, not forced, it's just there. But now we're choosing to recognize that there is awareness here in the moment, naturally. Of course, it's always there, but it's often the case that the mind is unaware of this present moment awareness, as strange as that is to say it that way. It's not like we can actually turn off awareness, but we can forget. The mind can forget, can be oblivious. So we say sometimes that we're keeping present moment awareness in mind. In one way, one technique or skillful means to help us keep the present moment in mind, present moment awareness in mind, is to use what we could call an exclusive object of awareness, a meditation object. So we've been training with the Buddha's instructions for mindfulness of breathing now for a couple months. So let's take that up as a particular exclusive meditation object. Of course, nothing needs to change. We're already breathing. And the breathing, the way we're breathing is perfectly fine. It doesn't need to be different than how the body was already breathing. Because it isn't a breath control practice. It's actually a practice of being interested in what is ordinary. And breathing in and breathing out is an ordinary, natural process that just keeps happening as long as the body is alive. Breathing in and breathing out happens. And so we're using this natural process to get to get better at keeping the present moment in mind. Because of course, breathing in and breathing out, knowing the experience of breathing in and breathing out only happens in the here and now. So when we actually feel the sensations of breathing in, maybe at the tip of the nostrils, or maybe as a rising in the chest or the abdominal wall, that's happening here and now. When we notice the sensations of breathing out, that's happening in the here and now. And don't assume that this is an easy training to keep the breath, the breathing in and the breathing out in mind. Because we're also learning how to be interested and attentive without getting tight and controlling with the breath. How to allow the breath to continue to be a natural process happening on its own, even as we're learning to be intimately aware, keeping this process of breathing in mind, keeping the process of breathing out in mind through the duration from the beginning to the end of every in and out breath. And of course, just willing to start over and over as often as needed. And what really helps in this training is to notice the pleasure of non-distraction. So when there is this relaxed but continuous awareness of our meditation object, the physicality of breathing in and out, then you should notice that the mind really appreciates the non-distractedness, the simplicity, or you could even say the seclusion of this training. So notice that pleasure if you can. It's subtle, but important to recognize. And of course, this training means we're letting go of whatever else the mind might be wanting to think about or pay attention to. So it's a huge letting go. And choosing to be interested in this simple, natural process of breathing in and breathing out. As if nothing else right now is important. Learning how to be intimate without tension. And of course, there might be tension in the mind or the body, but we're not using or thinking that we need the tension in order to do the training. Just might be residual tension in the mind or body, and we need to accept that. And in the Buddha's instructions as a support for learning how to be more present, more interested, more intimate, he suggested that one notice the relative length of each inhalation and exhalation, whether it's relatively long breath in or relatively short breath in. And one of the usefulness, this is useful rather, because there's a natural feedback as the breath, or rather as the mind settles, the body settles, the breath will reflect the settledness and become more refined, shorter, more simple, in and out. And it also just helps the mind become more interested if we're actually able to sense the relative length of the in or out breath. And again, we're not controlling the breathing process, just learning how to be attentive without being controlling. And there might even be some fear that arises when we cultivate this exclusive attention with our meditation object, the physicality of breathing in, the physicality of breathing out, because it requires such a profound letting go of whatever else the mind might be doing, thinking, paying attention to. So learn to trust that it's okay for a period of time to let go of the rest of the world and simply be aware of breathing in, simply be present with breathing out. And you can continue with this training, but when you feel ready, just moving on to the Buddha's next instruction. One trains oneself while breathing in, experiencing the whole body. One trains oneself while breathing out, experiencing the whole body. So we're not looking at just the painful sensations, we're training the mind to be interested in the whole body, totality of physicality as you're breathing in. So you're still aware of the rhythm of breathing in and breathing out, but it goes more into the background. And what comes into the foreground of attention is this totality of the body, the sitting body. It's almost as if we're saying yes to the physicality of the sitting body through the inhalation and then through each exhalation from the beginning to the end. It's a real act of generosity, this non-controlling, non-judging presence with the whole body as we breathe in. Not the idea of the body, but the actual experience of sensation. So just do the best you can. A seamless integration of awareness and the experience, the flow of sensation in the body. And you might notice the tendency, because it's a deep habit for probably all of us, the attention may want to go to the pain or the discomfort in the body. But instead, learn how to be aware of the whole body, to accept, to allow the whole body to be the way it is. So there's just knowing and the sensations being known. Through each inhalation and then through each exhalation.
Sarah. Oh, shit. Can't get it to work.
And when you can, begin to notice the calming effect. The body is responding to this non-judging, intimate awareness. So wherever, however you feel calm, the Buddha invites us to be aware of the calm in the body as you breathe in, keeping that calm in the body as you breathe out. And in doing that, the tendency is for that calm, that sense of embodied well-being, to begin to spread and deepen. And in a way, we could say that the mind and the body, the relationship of the knowing mind and the body, the movement of sensation is being healed. And the result is this embodied well-being, the sense of bodily calm. Remember, it's always okay if there's a need for some support to use a meditation word or a meditation phrase. So, for example, as you're breathing in, you could repeat the phrase experiencing calm or experiencing bodily calm to help bring the attention to the actual experience of calm. And then, of course, the same phrase as you exhale. So experiment with the use of a meditation phrase or meditation word whenever you feel that that might be helpful. And when it's not needed, then just let go of that added technique. We're learning how to keep bodily calm in mind through each in-breath and each out-breath. And this embodied well-being, when cultivated, the heart, the mind feels really safe in an emotional sense, as if I truly belong here in the present moment. It's not a mistake. And this really allows the heart to begin to recognize joy. And this is the fifth instruction from the Buddha in the set of 16 instructions. The Buddha instructs, while breathing in, experiencing joy. While breathing out, experiencing joy. Now we have a lot of ideas about what joy is. But in this more direct experiential sense, joy is just the sense of this moment, the activity of the body and the mind, free of resistance and friction. So sometimes we call that a sense of flow. But it can begin as a very simple, subtle experience, like that sense of vibration, the sense of everything happening on its own. And often it's noticed as a kind of lightness of heart, brightness, bright interest, because of how alive the moment experience seems to be. Because the mind isn't resisting, it isn't controlling, it isn't imposing some fixed idea, but rather instead it's more directly sensing how there is the movement here in the present moment and no resistance. And that's very light and joyful, uplifting, that it's all happening on its own. So as we breathe in, as we breathe out, for the last few minutes of our sit today, let's take up the training, breathing in, learning how to sense, how to experience joy. And then through that duration of breathing out, learning how to keep joy in mind. Our habit, of course, is to pay attention to what we think are problems. But can we sense the activity of the present moment, the body and the mind, and this activity free of resistance, free of holding, which is experienced as a kind of lightness in the heart, kind of flow or unfixedness in the heart, like the bubbling, tingling movement of vibration. But each of us, we have to discover, learn to recognize, and learn how to keep in mind. We have to learn to do this on our own. No one can do it for us. And it simply begins by this willingness to be interested in joy as you breathe in, to be interested in a fresh way. And then, of course, as you breathe out. as if every cell in the body had a simple, nice, beautiful smile. That kind of bright, light, buoyant quality of the heart and mind as you breathe in, as you breathe out, as if each aspect of the mind and body were bright and light and happy with that joy. Some of us, we have to learn to be unafraid of happiness. I go through some mental conditioning that I don't deserve to be happy, or this moment it isn't appropriate to be happy. But that's not actually how happiness works. It's just really a matter of choosing to recognize this capacity for joy and to learn to keep it in mind, and it will naturally grow and expand. So we could even call it joy for no good reason. So take a moment, adjust the body, whatever you need to do, so you're comfortable. And a big welcome to everyone. We have a nice growing crowd in our city center. It's nice to be back in person, and about 80 folks online, and who knows how many on our live stream at the YouTube channel. So there's 3 ways to participate in Sunday morning: here in the room, online, on Zoom, or at the YouTube channel. And I'll be teaching out in the East Coast for the month of October, but I'll come in 3 of those Sundays on that screen here. So people are, hopefully you'll keep coming in person if you don't mind. And one of those Sundays in October, Shelley will be covering, Shelley Graff, the other guiding teacher here at the center. And maybe I'll make some announcements, because happy to find out that Madeline and Joe or Joseph, who used to be one of our youth teachers, are willing to start it up again. Several people have been asking us, when are the children programs going to begin again? And sounds like the first and third Sundays. Is that right, Madeline?
That's right.
Yeah. So contact the center. We want to have a sense of who's interested. And did you guys determine an age range?
So we are saying kindergarten and up. If a parent wants to stay with their child who is younger than that, that would be welcome, so they could be in the space together. And then if it seemed like it was going well, there might be some flexibility for younger kids based on how many people are there that day, and kids need to be independent with toileting.
Yeah.
So some vagueness around younger kids, but kindergarten and up.
Great. So those of you online, it's kindergarten and up. But in any case, just contact the center if you have kids at other ages and you might want to get involved. And Madeline and Joe will need other volunteers to support. So we want to hear people who might be interested in supporting the youth group first and third Sunday mornings. right at the same time that this happens, just it will happen in the community room, and that allows the parents to be here. So keep that in mind if that makes sense. And a number of other things happening. Wynn Fricke is the co-founder of Common Ground, along with myself and also my beloved partner, is teaching the half-day retreat next Saturday, 1 to 5. That's online. And if you're around this afternoon, Kevin Griffin is doing a 1 to 5 half-day retreat for those interested in Dharma and recovery. Kevin Griffin, a longtime friend of the community here, lives in California but is in town teaching. And I think that's both online and in person, anybody interested in recovery and the Buddhist teachings. And now the registration is open. Shelley Graff and I are going to be leading our annual fall retreat. It's that first weekend in November, the 3rd through the 6th, online and at our retreat center. So you could be in person at the retreat center or online, wherever you live. And also now the registration's open for the year-end retreat. And that's online or here at the city center. We close the building for that period of the December 26th through the noon on the 31st of December. We've been doing that now. This could be our 30th year. We've been doing that year-end retreat. And so you go home at the end of the night, and but we have lunch and dinner here. Some people go home, like if they have a dog, and go home during the dinner break. But if you've never done the year-end retreat, consider that if you can get time off. Evening of the 26th of December to noon on the 31st. And you can get information, go to the calendar, go to that place in the calendar, and you'll see the link for the registration and more information about those two retreats. And I want to thank Shelley for covering for me last week when I was teaching on the West Coast. I think those are the announcements here. I want to also thank Nancy Bowler and Shannon Gibney, who organized the online small groups for about a year. And now Lucy and a few other volunteers are going to be doing it. So I'll introduce Lucy toward the end. But let's go back to our practice. And I mentioned at the beginning, for those online, we have the documents posted in the chat. One of the documents is here, printed on actual paper for those of you in the room. Everyone can find the resources for the Sunday morning talks on the calendar for this event. There's a link there. And one of the documents just outlines in a simple way the Buddha's 16 instructions. We call it for mindfulness of breathing, but really the breath is the predominant, exclusive object of awareness only for the first 2 steps. And then the breathing process is in the background for the rest, for the other 14 instructions. It's just like there to remind us, oh yeah, the mind is still present. How do I know? Because I'm aware of breathing in and breathing out. But we're really noticing different aspects of the mind and body for most of the training. And I know I like to kind of say this up front, that it can feel somewhat artificial, like even the way I instructed us today during the guided meditation. It's a little bit cookie cutter. You do this, then you do that, then you do this. But we're learning a map so that we can, kind of like learning scales when you learn the piano. So then you don't have to be tied to the linear progression of the map, but you understand the map. Like how to be aware, what to do with present moment awareness. Because the basic principle in the Buddhist teachings is it really matters what we pay attention to and how we pay attention. In a way, this is the central karmic act. You might think like whether I steal is the most, or whether I'm nice to my partner, or whether I take turns in traffic or things like that. Yeah, those are how we behave lays something down on our heart. The impression when I'm judgmental, that affects my mind going forward. But in a more subtle and ongoing way, every single moment, like this moment, we're paying attention to, like the present moment is vast. So what are we paying attention to now? And what does that set in motion in our mind? What and how are we paying attention right now? And is that setting in motion what we really most deeply desire to set in motion? So if I'm here paying attention to some emotional sensitivity, reactivity, like, what are you thinking about me? Do you like me? Well, what does that, paying attention to that with worry, with fear, in that way, what does that set in motion? Who do I become when that's what I pay attention to? I become neurotic. I become more hypersensitive to what I think people are thinking of me, right? So it matters. How about if we're sitting here, or you're sitting there and just sensing Mark's a human being, a suffering being, just like the rest of us. What does that set in motion? Maybe a tender-heartedness or whatever. So and it's not so much that there's a right way or a wrong way. There are more and less skillful ways to be paying attention. And it doesn't matter if it's subtle, it matters. It still matters. Just because it's subtle doesn't mean it doesn't matter to us. And part of spiritual life, you could say, is like a willingness to own that subtle stuff matter. And wishing that it didn't matter doesn't make it not matter. It just makes us avoid taking up the responsibility. And you see how that directly supports the wholesome desire to want to be more sensitive, because we need to be sensitive to more and more subtle stuff if we're going to have any chance at real happiness. If we stay on the surface of life, we won't really uncover the happiness that's available. So remember, we don't really have time in the morning instructions, the Sunday morning program, to do a lot of Q&A, but your questions, your reflections are really useful. So you're always welcome to send questions into the center, and then I'll weave them in to the upcoming weeks. And what I want to talk about, which is what I had been talking about earlier in September when I was here for the Sunday morning program, is this movement, like toward the conclusion of the first 4 instructions. It really comes to fruition with the 4th instruction. One trains oneself while we're breathing in to keep in mind, to be aware of embodied calm, embodied well-being. And that doesn't mean our body's perfect. We will have our aches and pains, or the chronic effects of old age and all the other stuff that is just there karmically in the body because of whatever came before for the body. But what can change when we have done the first 3 instructions sincerely with some competence is now the mind that knows, the mind that is capable of being present, intimate, is intimate with the body without judgment, without picking and choosing, right? Because the previous instruction was one trains oneself while breathing in, experiencing the whole body. One trains oneself while breathing out, experiencing the whole body. And that's a real training, because it's not easy. Like as we open to our body, it's almost like the attention gets tracked to whatever threat, whatever pain, discomfort we feel in the body. Just like when we're aware of the wider space, like the visual space of our experience, we notice what we like, the visual experiences that we like. We tend to notice the visual experiences that repulse us, and then we generally ignore the rest. So even with our visual experience, like notice we have the capacity, and check this out right now with me if you would, as we're gazing at the computer screen or here in the room, just soften the gaze so you're aware of the periphery of your visual experience. You're not fixating the visual attention on one visual object, kind of that soft, wide, inclusive awareness of the visual field. You see, that's a different way of being present with seeing, isn't it? And we can do the same with physical sensations. But we got to understand, it's not our habit to be aware of the body, physicality, sensation in that way. Right? We fixate on what's interesting. Pleasure in the body, pain in the body, ignore the rest. But there's something that happens when we can sustain that inclusive, trusting, non-judging awareness of the whole body. Through the duration of an in-breath, through the duration of an out-breath, and on like that with some continuity, beginning again when the mind slips off into distraction, beginning again, build that continuity. What happens is a kind of healing between the mind that's knowing, the mind that's sensing, and the body that's being sensed. And it's directly, subjectively, actually experienced as a kind of real as anything's real, sense of bodily well-being. It feels good. Calm, well-being, ease of the body. These are different words or phrases we could use to describe what the Buddha is asking us to keep in mind as we breathe in and we breathe out, to persist. So initially, we might not notice any of that calm or that sense of embodied well-being. But then all we're doing is we're being interested in it, actually sincerely interested in it as we breathe in. So whatever that is, that 10 seconds or 15 seconds it takes to breathe in, can I sustain interest in bodily calm, bodily well-being? And you see, it's a direct counterweight to the habit to want to pay attention to problems in the body, aches in the body. Like I had a bad fall on my elbow about a year ago, really terrible. I was doing some yard work and I fell on some concrete and the elbow took it. And that really hurt for about 3 months. And then it healed and it wasn't fractured or anything. But I've been noticing now, I just tell myself, because I think it's a good story, that the intense pain, I mean, it's almost like my shoulder's lame, and that somehow the trauma from the fall 14 months ago is now finally working its way up. Because I noticed right in that moment, you know how it can kind of go into slow motion as I was falling back, and then the elbow took the hit. And it was like slow motion. And I remember that transference going right into the shoulder, like just so slow, you know, and just thinking, oh, poor shoulder. But I never noticed that in the months when the elbow was like so delicate and painful. But now, 14 months later, it's like something's going on in my shoulder. And it's like that attention and the habit of fear wants to fixate, wants to glom on to that problem. But it sort of that way of paying attention can re-traumatize the trauma. It can reactivate it. Because, you know, it's this is a gross example, but it's somewhat funny. But my best friend from college, and for several years after college, we lived together, and yeah, just a dear one in my life. I don't see him too much anymore, but we went backpacking months right after we graduated from college out in the West Coast, and we were some high peak and having to hop from boulder to boulder, and he fell and really hit his rib hard. And I, ran back to him, standing there next to him, asking like, "Are you okay?" And he screams, "Get off my hand!" Because I was standing there with my big hiking boots on his hand. And it's like not having that breadth of awareness, right? Like really attentive, but not very wise, right? And that's the sort of childlike nature of our attention. It's like we presume we're in a dangerous place, and we need that kind of tight vigilance, but not that kind of relaxed, wide, comprehending presence that comprehends like how to show up. Oh, let's be inclusive. Yeah, there's pain in the shoulder. Something weird's going on in the shoulder. But do I need to fixate on that? Is that helpful? No. What's actually helpful, because of the way the body and mind works, is everything, including shoulder injuries, is an integrated happening. Things don't really exist in isolated ways, like it's a shoulder problem, right? For one thing, it didn't happen in the shoulder, It's a life problem, an existence, a mind-body problem. It's always a mind-body problem. And the only way we can be helpful is if we meet the moment with this wise, inclusive, soft, wide sensitivity. That's what's helpful. And so in the third instruction, we're bringing that kind of attention to the body. We're learning not to go based on where there's pain, but to have a more inclusive and generous presence. And then the body, the experience of the body and the mind together, the knowing mind, knowing the physicality of the body, is a sense of well-being. In the same way, when you have an interaction with a dear one, a real friend, and you feel like they're just there in a non-judging way, and they're not even presuming they know you, because they're so there, they're not in their idea of who you are. They're just there because they love you. They care enough to be open, to meet you now, not to meet their idea of you. You know how good that feels. It feels really good. I try to be there, like this morning. I mean, my partner, Wynn, is on the East Coast taking care of her older mom. And so I'm home alone with my four-legged friend. And I try to have a couple times every day that kind of moment with the cat. And it seems like the cat responds, like to be with the cat in a fresh way, not an autopilot, really sort of that sensitivity, like the way I'm showing up is responding nimbly, immediately, with all the signals. Not based on the presumption of how it worked last time, even. And of course, this is the model for how to live our life in that fresh, uncontrived way, not driven by expectations or even previous experience. It's not that previous experience doesn't inform, but it isn't defined. It isn't defining how we're relating. So the same with the third and fourth instruction. And then here's the important thing about then the transition from the fourth instruction. And remember, we have the cheat sheet. I'm really inviting people who are along for the ride, these Sunday morning and Sunday evening talks in the fall, when we're going through the 16 instructions, the Buddha's most complete instructions for the path and for meditation. And this a very important transition from the fourth instruction, where he's asking us to train ourselves to notice embodied well-being, embodied calm. We need to feel good in the body in this embodied way, because it makes us feel safe. When we feel really safe, what do you imagine is the natural response of the heart and mind when we feel really, really safe? We stop trying to control everything. we're much more willing to just let things be. And then this really helps us understand the fifth instruction, where we're really moving now to the activity of the mind. The first four instructions is about healing how the knowing mind is being intimate with the body. Physicality, but also seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, the kind of five physical senses. But it's really dominated by physicality, the sensations, right? How to be with that in a way that leaves the heart, body with this embodied well-being and the safety. And then when we feel safe, the mind relaxes its habits of control. And what starts to creep in to awareness, what awareness can be aware of, is the activity of the moment, the activity of the body and the mind, without control, without the mind imposing, projecting control. And that's what I meant in the instructions. You might remember I brought in that word flow, just because in psychology it's kind of a technical term now, the flow experience, right? And it's when there's activity. You could be making love, you could be playing basketball, you could be knitting, you could be cooking, you could be breathing in and breathing out, you could be chanting or praying. You can be basically doing anything, because it's not about the doing, there's an awareness of the doing, of the activity of body and mind, but nothing in that awareness is resisting or creating friction with the activity of the body and mind. And so what is perceived directly, experientially, subjectively, right here, me experiencing it, is the activity of the moment without resistance. And that's, for me, that's how I define joy. Joy is life minus friction. Joy is the activity of the mind and body, which is just the same as life. Life is the activity of the mind and body being known. Most of the time, it's life, activity being known, and the friction of fear and greed and denial and distraction. All of these are mind-imposed friction. But we can learn to be aware of the activity of the present moment, the activity of life, without that friction, that resistance, that projection. And when we do, subjectively it's experienced as a lightness of heart, because it's about what's not there. It's the friction not being there. So joy isn't so much what's there as much as it is what's not there. The resistance has begun to go away. Joy starts to creep in. And the training, and the Buddha says that, right? The instruction is, one trains oneself. Remember, it's the Buddha saying, hey, this isn't the habit of your mind, so you have to see this as a training. And the way you train is you keep in mind something that's not easy to keep in mind, because it's not your habit. Your habit is to notice friction and resistance. That's the habit of the mind. Where there are sparks, where there's resistance, where there's a fixation. But I'm asking you, trust me, please train yourself. As you're breathing in, it's only 20 seconds or whatever, can you keep in mind anywhere in your body-mind experience an experience of activity without resistance? And let's call that joy. Piti, sometimes translated as rapture. But that rapture, we can get tight with rapture too, but real rapture is a movement of joy without any resistance to the joy. Like, it's really, sometimes in a, unsophisticated way, I call it the opposite of a panic attack. Right? Because a panic attack is a movement of anxiety that leads to more constriction, which amplifies the movement of anxiety. Because whatever that energy that's moving when we're panicking, when we're anxious, when we're worried, now it has a more narrow passageway. So it gets, and then that makes us narrow it more, right? And then all of a sudden we feel like you're going to explode. And that's what we call a panic attack. A lot of energy moving through a very constricted space until it feels it can't move, and then it feels like it's going to explode. Now, joy is the opposite. There's movement, and initially the constricted space opens and it starts to feel good. So interestingly, the beginnings of joy are much more dramatic than when joy begins to mature. When it's really mature, joy is like a pervasive lightness of heart. It doesn't actually stand out, it's pretty subtle. But when energy's been really constricted and the grip begins to release, it can feel pretty like something's breaking open. A heart that's, or I sometimes use that. I don't know if it was true for you, but in the early 60s when I was in elementary school, like second grade or something, there was this weird thing that went around where, kids would say, okay, squeeze your fist as tight as you can. Anybody remember this? And then they do all sort of weird things that probably didn't have anything to do. And it was almost like a little sort of hypnotic thing, because they've had you like holding your fist for 2 or 3 minutes, and they'd say, now, can you open your fist? It's like, oh my God. Of course, you could eventually, but because of the sort of gimmick of the whole, sort of psych out kind of thing, you kind of felt like they had you in a trap. And it's a little bit like this chronic habit of being afraid, being controlling, not feeling good enough. We have these ways that we've, these vortex, these habits of being tight. And so when we have a lot of embodied well-being, the fourth instruction, and we keep it in mind, it's a direct challenge. It's basically in a deep, deep way saying, honey, I don't think you have to be tight. And the system begins to relax, and we can start to notice movement without friction. And it might be just a little lightness, a little kind of fluttering in your heart. Just subtle, like vibration, but unrestricted. But wherever, however, keep it in mind as you breathe in. Keep it in mind as you breathe out. Just keep joy in mind. And that's more in the meditative sense. And then during the day, just believe, as an experiment of truth, that joy is available. As you're walking down the street, as you're cooking, as you're doing whatever, that everything happening on its own. You doing what you're doing, but happening on its own. Everything okay. Not that the world is just, not that there isn't suffering, but right now, the heart's going to train and just letting it all rip, letting it all be, letting the activity of the moment move. So you're doing what you're doing. You're not trying to do it better or like a Buddhist. You're just letting everything be. So if you're a neurotic one in this moment, you're letting that be. And then feeling that lightness of heart, of not having to be the one who has to hold it all together, who has to do it all. And notice the lightness and keep that lightness in mind, that buoyancy of the heart, that bright interest. This is our homework. It has been for a while. I've been reminding us. This is a powerful counter-programming, especially given the news and our information age, where the economy is basically run by scaring people into purchasing stuff, right? Including purchasing more information, and then purchasing stuff that help take us down from our stress, But it's just more of the same, really. So how can we become somebody who is interested in joy that's always available? Which is really related to this wisdom. I don't know if people were here 2 weeks ago and I talked about the safety of sila, moral sensitivity, the safety of samadhi, the stability of present moment awareness, and the safety of wisdom I didn't get to talk about. But this is the safety of wisdom. The joy is really the beginning of it. It's like everything is wild and unfixed and neither good nor bad. It's just the activity of life. And the question is, it's already moving. Can that be okay? Life, internal, external, it's already happening. Friction, resistance, constriction is extra, unnecessary suffering. We're not becoming idealistic just because we're relaxing. If something needs to be done, we're going to be more competent at doing it because we're unfixed, not tight. So experiencing joy, it's sort of like this challenging question, like, is joy selfish? Is joy dysfunctional? Is joy inappropriate? Given the way I am, given the way the world is. And we have to really challenge the unconscious answers we have to those questions. Because basically we think, yeah, joy is selfish, joy is inappropriate, it's dysfunctional. When the world or when I'm like this, joy definitely isn't appropriate. Now, whether we say that out loud, a lot of us are conditioned, we're conditioned to think that, to believe that. That lightness of heart, not really appropriate. And part of it is we think it's a setup for betrayal. Because our experience of joy is when we're disconnected. You know, when we're delighting in a stupid TV show that's kind of lifted our heart a little bit. And underneath we kind of know this dark truth. It's going to be over in 35 minutes. And so we don't really trust the high, because the high is dependent on something that's actually not trustworthy. So the question is, can we find a joy that isn't a setup for betrayal? Then that joy we don't have to feel as a setup. It's trustworthy, and we can learn to integrate it in, and then we become a more resilient human being. So we'll come back to joy next Sunday and start to look how joy can morph into a more profound happiness. Sukha is the Pali word for ease, ease of heart. It's like the equivalent of that embodied well-being. There's a kind of ease of heart that exists for the mind-heart, that deeper trust, that deeper relaxation of the heart, the undefended contentment, undefended heart. So that's where we'll go next week. And want to thank everybody for coming. And remember, those online and those in the room, we invite everyone to stay for the small groups, but don't feel like you have to. It's really, of course, optional. But it's a great way to meet people in the community. So we're going to have a transition now. People in the room, if you want to leave, thanks so much. Please stay if you want to have a 15-minute group of 3 or 4 of you just chatting. And the theme is just this experience of embodied well-being and joy, just the joy of everything happening on its own, and your own experience of that or questions you have.